Welcome back, everybody. So this is the second episode of podcast, or Off the Back podcast. I'm sitting here with a man that many of you may know, Brandon Cassell. We've known each other for a long time. I'm sure we'll get into that. But we wanted to sit down, more or less, I wanted to sit down and talk to everyone. And we had a great response with the questions on Instagram that I threw out there. So it was good. So we'll get into it. For those of you who don't know Brandon, you'll probably get to know him pretty well by the end of this. So we'll start. So full name.
Brandon Bruce Cassell.
Bruce, I didn't even know my name was Bruce.
No,
See, I learned something new. Age.
39.
I'm getting up there. Height.
5'11".
Weight.
205.
Slim and trim. Years riding.
Well, 35 technically.
Yeah. Okay, well, years riding, seriously.
About 21 years now.
Okay. What's your current bike?
Ooh.
Pick one.
Which one? Yeah.
Pick one.
The bike I spend the most time on is the Santa Cruz Mega Tower.
Okay. Favorite place to ride?
Oh, loaded question.
Yeah.
Loaded question.
And here goes the next hour.
Yeah. So currently based on a trip in the fall, I'm going to have to say Thunder Mountain.
That's a place I'm yet to go. Favorite trail?
Another loaded question. I think probably all time Dirt Merchant.
Whistler, yeah.
Yeah.
Who do you hate to lose to?
Oh, wow. I actually I missed this on Adam's podcast, but I could have guessed probably a couple of those people. But if we're going back, I'm going to say a close friend and former downhill racer, Joey Jenkins.
Yes, Coach Joe. I hope you're watching this.
Coach Joe, for sure.
That's good. That's awesome. So that kind of gives you guys a bit of overview of Brandon, what he's into. Obviously, he's been riding mountain bikes for a long time. We've known each other for about 20 years as well. So, but I know his middle name was Bruce. So I'm learning something new today too. So we'll get into that. So let's hop into the questions. One thing I want to know, because I really don't know for sure, is how did you end up in London? So like, tell us a bit of your backstory. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you come from? And how'd you make your way here?
Okay. So grew up in a small town, Eastern Ontario, 401, right between Cornwall and Brockville. Okay. Right on the St. Lawrence River. Small town of about 1,000 people. Not many people are going to know this. It's called Iroquois.
Yep.
Moved to London in 1998 to go to school.
Okay.
I've been here ever since.
Crazy. London kept you.
I know. As I said, London has just enough.
Yeah. That's funny. So obviously we know each other through mountain biking. Started way back in the day. What got you? Like, when did you start like riding seriously and taking it to where it is now? And what got you into it?
So I bought a mountain bike to get around the city when I moved here for college in '98.
Like just transportation purposes? Just
transportation purposes, but obviously mountain bike was the go-to for that.
Yep.
Always had dirt bikes and BMX around as a kid. Okay. Nothing serious, just small town fun. Eventually did the shop tour on my mountain bike to see what the scene was like when I was here. I think first stop was First Cycle Works close to the college. Then I made my way downtown, To Wheels, Cycle Path. I think that was kind of it originally. Okay. And was introduced to the cycling world through the shops. Back then it was classic to have a small TV with videos playing in the shop. And I saw a little bit about the free ride movement in North Vancouver. A little bit of some DH, which I had no idea existed. Yeah. Cyclepath had video rolling, World Cup in Bromont, Mount St. Anne, some classic venues. And I just thought that looks pretty cool. So Dave through Cyclepath, it sort of introduced me to the world of freeride and downhill mountain biking.
Dave McNaught.
Okay. So yeah, he's kind of like the first person in the sport that I knew that was a true mountain biker. And
that evolved for you pretty quickly, right? Because then you ended up, like, how long after that did you end up working at Cyclepath?
Very closely. So I was done school in about a year and a half, realized that wasn't the thing for me. Wanted to make some money and get a bit of a discount on some parts. So I threw my resume out there to a bunch of spots. Eventually one busy February day, Brian from Cyclepath called me up and said, "Can you come build some bicycles?" Yeah. And I was like, "Absolutely. When do you want me there?"
I will be there.
I will be there. So that's actually 20 years ago, basically to now.
Yeah. So this timing is kind of crazy.
It is. So this is sort of my 20th anniversary in the bike industry. So I was on $1,000 hardtail like most people back then, 80 mils of elastomer travel, and then started to see all these other bikes.
Yeah.
And really see that it wasn't Lycra-based XC. I was introduced to trials, I was introduced to street riding, downhill. Like there was just so much more to mountain biking than I saw it from originally.
For sure, right? Like I think a lot of people, I know even myself sometimes, like you forget that back then you had to wait for videos to come out. You had to wait for magazines, right? It wasn't like it is now where you just click on YouTube and search.
For sure. Those videos were key.
Yeah, that's how you kept up with the sport.
It took a year, 2 years to produce, but yeah, that's what you waited for to get stoked and wear the VHS tape out, watching it to learn 100%. About mountain biking. So
crazy. So touching on that, so you've seen the sport evolve over the last 20 years. Obviously, still having involved working and managing a shop here in town. What is the next thing, right? Like I know this conversation, like just that question, go on for a long period of time. But like if you had to kind of seeing where it's come from, knowing what that's coming in the industry, what's the next thing?
That's tough. I don't know about the next thing. But mountain biking is evolving and growing again at a rapid rate, like we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s, before money was kind of pulled out of the industry. A lot of people equate that Lance Armstrong's success in road took away from the mountain biking that was going on at that time frame. And ever since about 2008, 2010, it's been growing again in the last 5 years, a ton. So we're seeing a lot of female riders in the sport, lots of kids in the sport. So I think that's really the future of it, is that we're going to see a broader, group of people using involved in the sport.
Yeah. So I mean, like I think mountain bike, a lot of us who are into it, we always get caught up in the technology aspect of mountain biking and it progressing. But I think you're right. It could not so much hinge on a product or a feature, but more so on the end user.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that.
For sure. So. Like hopefully we'll see more pump tracks pop up, more trail pop up. Like inevitably with more users, there's going to be more advocacy for mountain biking. So it'd be amazing to see it like hockey rinks and golf courses in possibly 10 or 15 years from now.
That would be super cool. So kind of, going back to when you started, the Ontario downhill race scene. Right. So this is something that I know you got very heavily invested in.
For sure. And I didn't even know it existed until I started in the shop.
Right. So, it was strong for, I would say, probably over a decade. It was a really strong race series. What do you think the strength of that series was when it was at its peak? And then what do you think I don't want to say undoing, that's not really a fair question, but like, what do you think happened that we kind of saw it disappear over the course of a couple of years?
So there have been many conversations over the last 6 or 7 years about this, because everyone tries to figure out what happened to the Ontario race scene, because it did taper right off.
It just disappeared over the course of a couple of years.
We saw people completely get out of the sport because it wasn't accessible in Ontario anymore. There was one person in particular that was a driving force behind the series. And I think, in a lot of cases, that's, a huge factor.
Pete Appleton, shout out.
Pete Appleton put in a lot of time making it happen and make it work. He went from not making money to possibly not making money again, in the cycle of that. But he grew the sport to be quite big. In the infancy of downhill for me, if I wanted to downhill in Ontario, I had to go to the race series to ride chairlift.
That's true.
This is pre-Blue Mountain, pre-Horseshoe, pre-Sir Sam's. So if you wanted to downhill, you either had to drive out of the province or the country or go to a race. So that was the lure for me in a way, being a bit of a competitive person.
Yep.
The racing was obviously intriguing to me as well. I went in 2001 and watched a race in Ontario, thought that it was pretty cool and I'd want to give that a try. Friends of mine, we went to the World Cup at Mount St. Anne in 2002.
Okay.
Watched the World Cup, rode St. Anne, rode Bromont. Conveniently, it was a Horseshoe O Cup on the way home. So inevitably, I convinced the guys to stop by.
That must be eyes wide open 4-day trip.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing. Right? So, I mean, we went to Vermont in 2001 on the recommendation of a good friend, Matt Defoe, who went there in the 90s on a hammer race, minimal brakes and suspension, and was losing his mind at how good the trails were. So when he knew I got a suspension bike, he was like, you got to take this thing to Vermont. So that spawned the trip to the World Cup, because obviously we had learned about it and thought that'd be pretty cool to go check out in our home country, and the riding was phenomenal. But trying a race coming out of a full week in Quebec and Ontario, I think I had a bit of an advantage over most of the dudes in my class. So back then it was senior sport, senior expert, and pro between 19 and 29. I was in my early 20s, and I raced the senior sport class on my way home. And it was a 2-run format, which most people don't know too, unless you go back. It was best of 2 runs, and I managed to win that race substantially on my first run. And from that point forward,
you're hooked. You're
absolutely. Yeah.
So I know this, but not too many people I think do. So kind of in line with that racing, you raced a winter 4-cross race, right?
Yeah, so, might be the only one that's ever happened around here.
Yeah. So 4-cross, for those that don't know, it's basically like snowboard across that you see in the Olympics, where 4 people going down a hill, jumps, turns, do that on bikes, which typically happens on dirt for us in the summertime. I think it was a Red Bull event.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Ryan Markham, in conjunction with Jose, Joe Mama Cycle, decided to put on this event at Camp Fortune. So it was a Red Bull Canada event. Yeah.
So take that idea of snowboarding on snow and go on bikes. So how did you hear about it? What was your bike setup, and how did you do?
So being a good friend of both Jose from the bike industry and Ryan Markham, who was a longtime friend who had the job at Red Bull Canada. Obviously, they reached out to me and thought I would be interested in something like this.
Really?
Because back then we also had an outdoor 4-cross series, thanks to Pete Appleton again. But it was on BMX tracks, which was relatively cool, but we hadn't really had anything gravity fed. So when they mentioned it was going to be at Camp Fortune, it was a notorious Nationals DH venue back in the day, close to my hometown, which is always awesome to head back to the Ottawa Valley. So that year was a big year for me, because I had been racing as a privateer, obviously, up until that season. Pete Appleton was the manager of the team along with Jeff Monk. It was Drop Machine Cassell.
That's right.
So I kind of signed on with the team for the first time that year. Cassell Bicycles was the title sponsor, I think, for the second year that year. And I had ordered up the Supreme DH bike and the Absolute 4-cross.
That's what you raced.
I got a bike and a frame sent in directly from the factory in France, which at that time I thought was the coolest thing, to have the hookup directly with Cassell bikes and the rich history of racing that those guys have. Also a huge compliment from Pete to bring me onto this well-established team. So I had just built the Absolute 4-cross, sort of for the winter bike show that would have led up a little bit after that, and decided to throw on some Michelin mud tires.
So you didn't go studs. You went like a deep, spike mud tire.
Spike tire. It was only about 2 inches wide back then, right? 26-inch wheels. And we got carted up to the top in the Cat. So they shuttled us to the top. They built a box in the front of the Cat. I take about 12 riders at a time to the top. So I raced my hardtail.
Interesting.
It was an interesting mix.
I can only imagine
at that race. Everything from downhill bikes to trail bikes to jump bikes. Basically.
Yeah, I was thinking you'd see a little bit of everything. And how'd you do?
So it went pretty well for me. So it was difficult. As we rode, the snow got deeper and deeper in the berms. They actually had to plywood out the majority of the lips so they could make an attempt at jumping them, because they did their best to pack it down, but inevitably the smaller tires were slicing through. But I qualified in the top 3, I think it was, at that race, and then in the end I ended up winning that event. So I actually just threw out part of that trophy. I
forgot you won that,
just threw out part of that trophy in my January bike room cleanup.
So what was part of the trophy?
So they took an old frame, painted it up with the decals and such, then they froze it in a bucket with cans of Red Bull so that it was an actual frozen trophy to present. So they froze the head tube with cans of Red Bull in there. And then they actually shot off fireworks on the step down gap that was about 50 feet to the finish line for the final of that race, which I thought was pretty cool.
That's crazy.
That whole mix of things doesn't happen very often. So right. Pretty cool moment.
Yeah, when Red Bull do things, they typically do it right.
Yeah, honestly, it was probably one of the first times they supported an event like that in Canada, and largely in part because of Ryan. So.
Yeah, that's great. That's super cool.
So it's a unique one to look back on for sure.
For sure.
First race with the team, first race on that bike. first race of that kind.
It would have been like January, February? Or was it like...
Yeah, I think it was February. January, February, yeah.
It had to have been freezing.
It was cold. I mean, Camp Fortune's not a warm place.
No, it's not warm like in the summertime.
No, it was a cold day, especially to make my now wife stand out in all day and support me.
We'll get into like the wife things later. So what's your favorite racetrack of all time? You've ridden a ton of places, raced more places than most people can name.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I figured this would come up because it's a popular one, and I don't even know if I could name a specific track, but some of my favorite tracks are going to be Nationals track at Mont Saint Anne. Early days for me, like 2005-ish, because I mean that terrain is unlike anything else. I was a big fan of the U.S. Open track at Diablo Freeride Park, now Mountain Creek Bike Park. But for me, I'm going to actually say any DH track at Platicum Mountain. I've always had good success there. I love the terrain there. It's unlike anywhere else you can go.
Yep.
If you haven't been there, you need to try and go.
Yeah, for those of you, sorry to interrupt, but for those of you that haven't heard that name before, Platicille, look up Roxbury, New York. It's literally in the middle of nowhere in New York State. Like, it's pretty eclectic, area. But look it up. It's mountain biking. Like, you're right. Like, you can't duplicate it.
No. And every track they run there is unique.
Yeah.
And equally as difficult and fun and technical. So yeah, I just say really anything that Platy would put on. It's a shame we're not racing there as much these days. But it's like the classic race spot for me.
Cool. What's your biggest accomplishment racing?
Results-wise, I mean, on paper, the best result's going to be a U.S. Open result.
Okay.
They used to have 150 to 200 people in the Open/Pro class, which is big. That was like the size of World Cup pro fields then.
And like that top 10 was a World Cup pro field back then, right? Like those guys were some heavy, quick guys.
Absolutely. So, but they only took 60 for the final, or it was 80 in the final at a World Cup back then. And I tried several times to make that cut and got very close, but I made it in. I can't remember exactly what year it was, maybe 2007, 2008. Made it into the final, like just squeaked in on like 57th, 58th spot, but then managed to stick my time in finals and move up into the top 40 because so many people went checkers or wreckers in finals, and I was fairly consistent in my riding. So I knew if I pushed it, I'd probably end up like them, and arguably maybe I should have, because you only have so many opportunities to really put yourself on the line. Yeah. But I chose to kind of stay within that 99 percentile and managed to slide into the top 40, which is a big result.
That's huge
for me, and a big venue.
Cool. And so that's like result wise, that's the biggest. What's one race result where you look back, you're like, I might not have been in the top 10, I might not have been a high ranking, but I overcame so much over the course of a weekend or over the course of like a week that result means a lot.
That's a tough one.
And that's off the top of my head, so he's going to probably take a minute to think about it.
That's tough. I mean, in racing, you overcome so much in general. What would I say? It's tough. A lot of people get stumped with these types of questions. I don't know.
We'll come back to that. We'll revisit that. Yeah. There's a lot of questions, so we'll keep going. So accomplishments are great. As in racing, failures happen. Shit goes wrong. What's one thing that you've been like, you know what? If that just would have gone right. Like, so I would say, what is like the biggest disappointment like on racing? Like, what's the biggest failure you feel like you've had?
I don't know. There's been a couple times. I think when you crash and you finish the race, you feel like you're out of the race. Yeah. But then your time reflects that you're still very, very close. Like the best recent example I could give of that was U.S. Open, which you were there with me. The downhill track was amazing, but the monsoon rain that we got the night before and the day of made it just ridiculous conditions to race in. I had 5 crashes
And by the third one, I almost pulled over and drank a beer. But I was like, you need to continue on and finish this.
Yeah.
I started it. And I got down to the bottom and sat in the hot seat for like 20 riders, only to get bumped out by a handful at the end. So I think to crash 5 times and be within grasp of winning the OG crash at the US Open's probably the most recent example of that.
Yeah.
You know, don't give up. Because,
just keep going. Yeah,
exactly. You never know. Like everybody could have 5 crashes in that race, and when you're racing the clock, prime example.
I remember too, like that race, waking up in the morning and just seeing how muddy everything was, and like you would walk through the parking lot, and people, hey, you're getting ready for your race? No, I quit. Like there was a ton of people that just were like, no, we're good, and like they had hundreds of dollars invested in going to this race already, and they're just like, no, we're out. So I mean, the fact that you even got the gate, like, huge kudos for that. And then I mean, like I said, 5 crashes and 1 stop for a beer, but like I said, never give up.
No, for sure.
Sure. So we've been going to races for a long time together. I am a small cog in the wheel of what has really evolved. You know, started I think 10 years, 12 years ago maybe now, as the Adrenalineracer team. So I guess for me, questions that really never got answered, but just kind of knowing for you as long as I have, why did you start it? Like you said, you were on a established team.
Yeah, I was on one of
Drop Machine, come on to like, they were winning national races, doing very, very well as a team. So why did you kind of branch out away from that and start your own deal?
So I loved being a part of that, but I think part of learning and being involved with that team that year, I learned a lot more about the sport, more about the inner workings of team, sponsorship, a lot of the things I didn't really know before. I was definitely inspired by a couple people. I mean, one everyone knows, Steve Pete, right? He, for most people that don't know, had some troubles in the early 2000s, leaving GT and sponsorship, and started a company, Royal Racing, to help boost his sponsorship and appeal. So that was definitely some motivation for it. Also, Drew Potler, very popular Ontario rider that now lives at West and great athlete himself, had founded Primary Racing, Chris Cousineau out of Toronto. And I wanted to have something like that of my own, always coached team sports growing up. So I had that, that interest in helping people progress. But the main reason was because I struggled to learn everything on my own to get to an elite level, and thought I could help other people shave a lot of that learning out. And then also having the store, it was a great tool to use for marketing the business, marketing myself, and then just doing something different. All the teams back then were based around either pro, elite, or junior. And my idea was to try and have some representation in every age category, along with fostering youth. So that was really kind of the motivation behind it, and went to my still boss with this crazy idea that we should start a mountain bike team. And she said yes. So I actually kind of got it going while I was on Drop Machine with a couple athletes, and then it evolved to me and us joining with Giant Bicycles, and it's
been crazy.
12 years in the making.
It's evolved like crazy, and like you said, like Steve Pete, a lot of people know like Josh Bryceland's, he's had a few guys come from like that race team program. And I mean, you've experienced that similar feeling, right? Like seeing guys like Brad Zadrillik, Adam Robbins come through that program,
for sure, right
from the time they're 11 and 12 years old, and now they were pro athletes. At their peak.
It exceeded really well.
So you've seen it evolve and like change and more for the last 12 years. Where do you think it keeps going in like the next 3 to 5?
Well, it's been tough. I mean, with the lack of series, Pete unfortunately moved on and went to work for POC in Sweden and do some other things, and no one else really stepped in long term with the series. So us losing the series, it's tough to foster young athletes along, because we went from saying, hey, drive a couple hours to try some racing and I can coach you, to, hey, let's drive 9 hours away. And I think the opening of bike parks has also challenged racing and young racers as well, because it's a lot more appealing to just go ride the lift with your buddies, do some riding in a non-competitive environment. So there hasn't been that many kids in the sport to kind of bring on board and foster along. We lost a lot of our juniors to work, college, girls, all those things over
happens. You turn 16, bikes go away, cars and girls.
But we had a really good run. I think we're at 15 people that were either expert level or junior level racers that turned elite or pro at some point in time. So it's a pretty amazing run. We have a junior on the team now, a little bit different than when we were putting 4 to 5 kids on O Cup podiums back in the day. But thankfully, through my dual slalom series, we found a young kid from north of the city that's quite into it. Got his feet wet last year. But I would love for there to be more. That being said, now that I'm a dad and I have more on the go, I don't have as much of me to give on that side of things. So less is kind of more for me right now. So
I think for me, like we're kind of in like it wasn't its heyday, you know, 5-6 years ago. It was crazy. The way I see it happening, you touched on it. You're a father now. You and Derek have those next generation of rippers coming up, right?
So you have an interesting.
The BMX classes in Ontario could be absolutely heavy for a number of years to come with your kids and his kids racing it. So maybe that's the next evolution.
Yeah, and I mean, thankfully, you know, George Ulmer, who's a friend of ours and runs the Eastern States Cup, has partnered with the Cliff Kids, and we've got free enduro racing for kids that are young too. So I know once I think our kids and other kids develop some more skills, it'll be amazing to take them out and introduce them to the sport at a low cost in an amazing environment where either we can go with them or other parents can guide them along and do some racing. So yeah, we maybe just be a bit longer cycle than before. So
because it used to be like every 2 or 3 years there'd be kind of like that next cycle of juniors coming into the program and then, you know, moving to elite, and then like when those guys are moving out, there was another group coming in behind them.
Absolutely.
And maybe just a little bit longer of a cycle, which is crazy. So started the race team, and at the same time you're managing this race team, you also owned a skate park, an indoor skate park. You're a sucker. So, you know, tell us a bit about that, where that came from, and just what, like, you had all this on the go. You're managing a store, you're running a race team, you're racing yourself, you're training, and then you're like, yeah, I'll open up a skate park. Like, why?
So I always wanted to have my own business, so it's been amazing working with Sherry at To Wheels, and I sort of felt like I had a shop within a shop, but I always kind of wanted to have my own baby. I come from a family of business owners in sporting good retail, so I kind of felt like, you know, the writing was on the wall my whole life. Moved to London and thankfully got involved with these guys, but I kind of wanted to still have my own shop for the longest time. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, we have tons of product out there. We don't always have a place to use it. There was this facility that we were going to a little bit in St. Thomas, and then unfortunately they had to sell the business, and I thought maybe this is an opportunity for me to have my own place, have a place to ride and train a little bit, you know, provide the community with a place still, because there were lots of people frequenting there, and it would also help foster business along at my day job here at the shop. Yeah, I mean, we took a huge chance. You know, a lot of places like that don't last a year. Thankfully, it had, you know, years of business behind it. But who knew that the growth of the sport, more facilities were going to pop up in that same time frame. So it was difficult. But probably the most positive thing from it was I basically got a business degree from actually operating a business. You know, and being involved in every aspect of the business. It was a big learning curve, and it grew a lot of business here. You know, we had big BMX business, we had a big dirt jump bike business. We had people traveling in from 8 hours away.
That's crazy.
I mean, when I would host a mountain bike park event, which was quite big back then, and obviously almost doesn't exist now. We'd have the Doberman team come down from the entire weekend and sleep in the foam pit.
They're coming from like Montreal, aren't they?
Yeah, right.
That's crazy.
So it was pretty unique. So when I took over, we had some big contests. I think it was 85 people at my first BMX contest. We thought it was going to run 6 hours. It ran 12 and a half hours. It was insane. It was the coolest thing ever to host an event like that and watch the progression go down and just the crowds. And it was, the whole thing was a very amazing experience. So.
And it was cool. And just like the race team, like the talent that came through that place and came out of that place, like
absolutely.
I'm trying to think stuff off the top of my head now. Like I know Andrew Bigelow, who's still killing it.
For sure. Matt McDuff. Braden Barrett Hay, Logan Pete, like Brett Reeder. Mike Gray, who rides for Harrow BMX. Like it's amazing to see when there's a facility like that And these youth
grow up with that environment. What can happen?
Yeah.
You know, we went from a few riders in Ontario as professionals to like a whole group of them that are getting paid to ride
Still,
bikes full time,
right?
and some of them still continue on with their contracts and are riding pro. So I find it quite rewarding to be involved in somebody's progression and then see them do amazing. Like I can feel the emotion, you know, in that, and I think that's pretty special. So
it's so cool. So last question, kind of on the racing side aspect, because we got a ton to get to. For the most part, you've managed to stay pretty healthy racing. As someone who's been through multiple surgeries because of mountain biking, I'm astounded by how you've managed to stay as healthy as you have for as long as you have. Starting to catch up a little bit with you now, but how have you managed to really not, you know, to race at a high level, win high level races, but not get hurt? Like, obviously you don't try and crash, but as you know, crashing is part of going fast. Like, you have to learn how to do that. Like, how have you managed to stay healthy this whole time?
I mean, I think Wade
Simmons said it best.
A long time ago, that you need to be a professional at crashing before you can be a true professional rider. So there's a lot to that for sure. But it all comes down to calculated risk. Like, there are so many people that go out there and it's checkers or wreckers. They're either going to win or they're going to lose. You know, they spend so much time injured. For me, if I was going to invest all this time and money in racing, I needed to get from race to race to race to get better. Because being from Ontario, I didn't have the time.
Whistling in your backyard.
Or the terrain to really ride between venues. I worked 6 days a week at the bike shop, 5 days a week at the bar, so that I could pay to race as a pro. So I was always trying to make the most of every trip and every venue, and it was all about that calculated risk. I needed to, every risk, big risk I took, I would watch as much as I could. I would, you know, run up to things as many times as I needed to be comfortable with it to do it. And I think some of it's luck, without a doubt, but most of it is taking calculated risk, you know, and not. I mean, I took a lot of risks. Don't get me wrong, but I
think some of it comes down to natural athletic ability and in a certain capacity too. So I think between being smart, being a little bit of lucky, and being pretty athletic, I was lucky for a long time. But like you said, you know, it's catching up with me now. Yeah,
like on a sidetrack. So you're now, like, do you want to fill people in on kind of what's going on with your shoulder?
So since I quit racing as a pro, I've had all these issues with soft tissue from not huge crashes, but from what you would consider to be a pretty normal crash. And this past fall, I had a bad crash racing dual slalom down in Maryland, which some of you know. And I just recently found out that my rotator cuff's torn 95% of the way through. I have a tear in my bicep. I have a little bit of arthritis in my AC joint, which I've separated 5 times over the years. And there's a little bit of a labral tear as well. So I'm due for some work. What are you doing next weekend? Under doc's orders.
Nothing. No. I've been training pretty hard since I got hurt indoors for this North American Continental Enduro at Windrock.
Hear that? He's going racing.
We're going to a really gnarly place. But 5%
of a rotator cuff, he's gonna go mountain bike racing. That's mountain bikers.
It is.
That's.
I'm a sucker for punishment, but yeah, we're going racing next weekend, so we're going to take things month by month from there. I'm not going to hide the fact if I have a crash, I could be out for a couple months before I even think about pedaling again.
But I think like I kind of all goes back to what you said about like calculated risks, like knowing that you have that shoulder injury.
For example, we went away a couple weeks ago.
28,500 feet of downhill. Maybe did a couple of suicide no-handers. Shoulder felt pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I go down in a simple crash. It could be polar opposite.
But like you said, though, like those calculated risks that you take and like your experience, I think is really what's allowing you to continue to do this. Because if someone wasn't experienced or wasn't as talented, you know, any corner could be their last corner with an injury like you have. But I think just like that ability for you to retrail and understand it and know what can and can't happen with that shoulder.
I've got to be a lot smarter now than I was
last summer, for sure.
Which is, you know, again, that goes back to managing.
For sure, and experience, you know.
All right, so that pretty well wraps up kind of a good portion of the cycling, racing side of things. We'll get back into it later as we get some of the Instagram questions that came through. But for now, we're going to move on into questions that I think a lot of people want to know, but either are too shy or really aren't sure how to ask the right questions, but I haven't really long enough, I'll ask you. So you've worked in the bike industry for, what'd you say, 2004? 2004?
No, 20 years this year.
Yeah, that's right. So 20 years. So you've seen it evolve and change. What's the biggest thing you've seen? Like, is it technology? Is it rider? Is it terrain? Like, what's been like the biggest thing you've just been like?
I mean, yeah, really everything. I mean, obviously in the last 6 years, we've seen a huge jump in technology, especially in the trail bike segment, obviously. Thankfully, enduro racing in Europe spilled over into North America, and that has created a lot of light, durable product. So as you know, and many know, we spend way more time descending on trail bikes than we do on downhill bikes these days, which I never would have predicted 10 years ago, even. The other side of things, obviously, bike parks. We have a lot more places to ride just on the East Coast alone. Blue Mountain's invested money, Killington's invested money, Thunder's invested money. You know, we've got Windrock Bike Park, Bailey Bike Park in the southeast. So I think that those are the two biggest things, obviously, in the last 10 years, is that we've got a lot more places to ride, we've got a lot better equipment to ride, and a lot more people are riding. Yeah, and it's kind of, do you think that's going to continue? Like you said, like the bikes are becoming better and better and more capable all the time. So you aren't having to own 3-4 different bikes to, you know, do different things. You can kind of all do it on one bike for the most part. Absolutely.
Like we both race dual slalom on our enduro bikes, but that we take downhilling all winter. Like it's kind of crazy what you can do on the bikes now.
For sure.
Like, do you think the bikes and how capable they are going to like lead to more places opening up for access?
Well, for example, like we've tossed around the idea that we think, you know, as much as I hate this term right now because it's used a lot, an e-bike oriented bike park where you're essentially self-shuttling, where you don't have the cost of trucks or trailers or a lift or a gondola to get in some type of descending locally. So I think that, yeah, maybe there is a possibility where we're going to see other places open up and cater to more skill-oriented riding than fitness in Ontario, which I'd love to see.
Yeah. On the e-bike question, are they going to take over mountain biking, or are they just going to become a part of cycling, like mountain biking, road, dirt jumping? Like, where do you see that kind of e-bike?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to frame it, is that it's going to become almost a different discipline within, you know, cycling. There are some pretty heavy numbers being tossed around right now as far as the dollar amount that companies are selling worldwide. We're starting to see it a little bit more here in Ontario, obviously, but there is already someone trying to form an e-bike race series here in Ontario for next summer, and I think that we're a little premature on that because we don't have a lot of consumers with the product. Hopefully the price of the product is going to come down with a broader range of consumers, but everyone comes back with a guilty pleasure on their face after they've tried one of these things. So whether they're apprehensive going into it or excited about going into it, everyone kind of comes back with the same reaction. Oh, it's not what I thought it was. It's a lot of fun, you know, and they start to inquire. Anybody that's rented while they've been traveling is now coming and inquiring about purchasing. So it's, there's a lot of different ways it fits in that we didn't see originally.
Do you think for guys, like, do you think it's going to be guys like us who have ridden pedal bikes for years that make the shift over to, or do you think it's going to open up more consumers to cycling?
Both. Okay. So I had a good conversation with a former employee here today about some riding on Vancouver Island. And I learned a lot at Masters Worlds this summer about the guys in North Vancouver. And you'd be blown away at the amount of people that are using pedal assist bikes for laps after work or on weekends, because they're getting 3 times the amount of laps in than they were on their pedal bike. So it's not super age specific. But then, of course, the aging mountain biker that likes to climb and explore on the island is definitely the main demographic.
I guess that in like you know, like you said, with the technology getting better and better, the batteries getting smaller, bikes getting lighter, like you're starting. They don't look much different than a normal bike anymore, right?
It's hard when people walk through the shop to really set them apart these days. So
yeah, that's crazy.
So I think it's going to get people into the sport. It's going to keep people into the sport. and people are going to be able to go to explore places they normally wouldn't be able to explore. So I'm not a pusher of them by any means, but I think everyone should give it a try.
Crazy. So touched on it. We're in Two Wheels right now. We're hanging on the shop. What's it like managing a busy bike shop? Like, what does like a day for you look like compared to someone who might be, a 9-to-5 traditional job?
I mean, thankfully, it is pretty reasonable traditional hours. We're open from 10 to 6, 10 to 7, 10 to 5. So the hours are pretty reasonable, but it's usually, coming into the shop, opening things up, making sure that everything's in order, all of our ducks are in a row for the day. Obviously, we have a very condensed season, so it does make it very difficult in Southwestern Ontario. I feel like that season's being sandwiched in a little bit smaller than it maybe once was, just because of the way the seasons have shifted. So we've really got 4.5 months to make a year's worth of business work. So I'd much rather be in Arizona, Florida, California, these big, long, spread out 12-month seasons, a little easier for staffing and managing. I think the biggest challenge for us is obviously that staffing situation. You want to keep really key people in place, but you only need all of them for 4.5, 5 months a year. So I think that's the biggest challenge. I think the other challenge right now is that we've forced a lot of mechanics away in the industry over the years. They've taken other trade jobs, gone to factories, those types of things, because the pay hasn't been great.
Yep.
So we're trying to get some of those people back that have a good technical background, because as you know, the bikes are a lot more difficult. And they seem to become increasingly more difficult with motors and batteries and electric drivetrains and suspension. So a mechanic needs to be more dialed knowledgeable than ever.
True.
And I'm probably going to pay less than a tradesman. So it is difficult in that regard. But in London, the sports are very healthy. Road, hybrid, mountain, very equal parts for us here.
Yeah,
Two Wheels,
you guys, from my understanding, you guys have always kind of been like you said, equal parts, like a third, like 30, 30, 30, or 33, right? Like,
and I mean, it shifts a little bit, but inevitably it's going to. It's very close to 1/3 parts here in the store.
Crazy. And then, so like you touched on your biggest challenge. One of your biggest challenges is staffing. How do you guys manage that then? Because you're right. How do you keep someone a good quality staff member? And I think a lot of this has to go back to Sherry and the way she treats people. How are you guys combating keeping people year round and happy? And also, like you said, how are you guys, those mechanics that can leave and go work a trade for $25, $30 an hour, how are you keeping them for, which is less money?
So thankfully, this industry, passionate people want to be involved part of this industry. So you end up with people with a skill set that's probably above, because they are cyclists and they want to be involved in cycling. So we retain some good staff just because of that, which is amazing. And I think it says a lot about our sport and our community. We've started to send people down to Colorado to do some training to create an actual standard for us here in the store, so that everybody's on the same page, from the store manager to the manager to the mechanics, which is definitely helping with that training down in Colorado. But the boss has also been pretty amazing in that she's realized if you spend a little less money in marketing and traditional advertising, and you put your money into a great staff, that it's going to pay off long term. So I think she was ahead of the curve on that. And it's amazing. We've got great full-time staff, and it shows in the summer when we're busy.
For sure, yeah. So. The shop's always busy in the summertime. There's always people in here. And I think the mechanic aspect, the staff aspect, that's not just this store. That is Canadian bike shops as a whole, right? Because we are a seasonal, climate.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a challenge. So it's really cool to kind of hear how she's kind of, like I said, early adopter. She was doing this 10, 12, 15 years ago, right? Treating people that way. So I think that says a lot to her forward thinking in terms of running a business.
For sure.
Next up. So what is one thing that the average consumer might not know about a bike shop? And this will kind of lead into the next question of, a lot of people look and shop online. I think you can't really ignore that now. What is something that your average Joe orders something online and they get it to the door? What is one thing that they're missing that they would have if they bought from a bike shop?
Well, a lot of people, when they're buying online, revolve their purchase around reviews. So in a traditional sense, the review is coming from that experience in the store, from a staff that's hopefully very well educated on the products that they're presenting to you when you're in our store. I think when you're getting a review online, it can be questionable. Yeah. You know, the quality of that review may have been generated by a company these days, because that is a business as well. But I think the big benefit coming into the store still is that you're getting an honest face-to-face experience. There's thousands of products that we can carry, but we're carrying certain ones for a specific reason. We've been around 49 years, so a lot goes into the decision making on these products, because there's never been a more confusing time to buy products, right? There's so many products out there. I mean, obviously we can't warehouse as much as some of the big companies do, but we can help you with fitment. We can help you with, lots of different things that make your experience better that you're not going to get from an online store. And I think that there's a large percentage of the consumer base that wants that human interaction still. Yes. So, I mean, there's definitely people that don't, and I will admit I'm a busy person. The reason we have an online store is so people can pre-shop before they come here now. Yeah. I think that's a big part, of business these days. But I think people still want that human interaction, and that, to be able to see that maybe you're passionate about the products that you're selling.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it there, like people pre-shopping before they come in. Like, I can text you and kind of find out what you have in stock, and like I still use the website sometimes, where like what tires they have in, like, it's easy and it's convenient, and I still come in and buy them. Is that how you think brick and mortar stores continue and not poo-poo the internet, but make it useful to themselves, where your hours are 10 to 6. That's when doors are open, people are here, but people can shop 24 hours a day now.
24/7. Yeah.
And is that, like, do you think that's kind of the future for a lot of bike shops using the internet?
I think that's going to become, that segment will continue to grow.
Yeah.
But I don't think it'll ever overtake brick and mortar stores. Like I said, I think that human component, the passion about it, we have people that just come here to hang out for 3 hours because they love being around the staff, the cycling community, the shop. And I think you miss out on that. And, a lot of people don't realize that shops generate a lot of the community, whether it's events or demos, and those types of things within the community that grow the sport and keep the sport alive. And you don't see a lot of that from an online store. Typically they might sponsor a race or do something like that, but they're not actually doing stuff within your community to help grow the sport or maintain the sport or be involved in the sport. So
use you as an example and share, like, she allowed you to start a race team, which then fostered an entire,
absolutely,
half a province worth of athletes.
For sure. And I mean, right now we've got the Dual Solemn series, which again, we took a bit of a chance. We wanted to have something gravity oriented, skill oriented. You can do all kinds of fitness based stuff here in the province in Southwestern Ontario. You can't do anything like I get when I go away to the mountains. So I decided to do this series so that when people are coming in and buying a bike from me, that you've got a place to go and use this tool close to us, meet like-minded individuals. And we've seen that series grow from a sponsorship standpoint, from an athletic standpoint,
it's crazy.
And from an attendance standpoint. Yeah. It's cool how those little things can make a huge difference. And it's fostered sales along for us too. So it's a win-win for everybody.
Good. All right, so that's kind of enough of the bike stuff. We're getting something a little bit more personal now. You're a husband, a father of 2 kids. How do you manage to be an amazing dad, amazing husband, yet still be competitive when it comes to racing? How are you managing? Because I think that's, most dads are probably like, yes, please answer this question, because I don't have children, but I can only imagine what it's like.
I mean, it's not easy, for sure. I don't like to sugarcoat being a parent like a lot of parents do. I think I'm a little bit more upfront about how it really is, because I don't understand why you would hide some of it. It's definitely not easy. I've learned to operate on less sleep. And I think a lot of busy people, not an unhealthy amount of sleep, but I've managed to operate on less sleep. If I want to get up and ride my trainer before anyone in my house is going to be upset, that's between 5 and 7 a.m. So I've got to drag myself out of bed, get downstairs before anybody's up, and spend that time on the trainer. So it's not easy, but obviously I'm very passionate about the sport. I want to put my best effort forward at everything that I do, whether it's being a dad, a husband, an employee, or a racer. And I'm competitive by nature, so I want to win. I want to be the best in whatever category I've signed up to race for. So you got to put in your time.
Yep. So that kind of like on a day-to-day basis, you touched on it there. Racing takes up time. Like to go away for 3 days and race, it's time. That's time away from work. That's time away from family. How do you manage, like how are you and your wife working together to schedule family time, yet you still get in as much racing as you want?
So I'm really lucky. Part of the reason why I chose this job was because I knew that it was going to allow me to do some other things that if I had a regular 9-to-5 job selling industrial flooring or something, this would allow me the opportunity to do more outside the sport. So, when my wife and I got together, she traveled with me to almost every single race. She was no stranger to the fact that I was passionate about this. She loved the fact that I was passionate about this and supported it. We knew that having kids, we were going to have to scale back on things. So we did some big races right before that, leading up to it. And we've scaled things back since. But it's, having it part of my job is allowing me to go away probably twice as much as most people, which I'm very thankful for. But it's not easy. Spending that time away from the kids isn't my favorite thing to do. But when I come back and I feel refreshed, I can be a better dad, a better father, a better employee because I've got to go and do something I'm really passionate about, and it's really fun. And it just allows me a lot of fortune to be working in this industry.
For sure. I mean, like you're still able to, race as, I don't want to say as often as you want because you always want to do more.
For sure.
But you're able to get in quite a bit of racing a year and still take family trips, right? And that's, like you said, the career you chose has kind of allowed you to do that, where if you had to bang out 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, you only had 2 weeks vacation, it gets eaten up pretty quick.
Absolutely. It takes a lot of management, for sure.
Crazy. So training is important. You've touched it a couple times now. You're very competitive. Training is important to be competitive.
Funny part is when I was racing pro, we never trained. We just worked and raced.
Now, as the sports evolve,
well, but we're all the team's focus has shifted from downhill and four cross to mostly enduro and slalom, and the short intervals in slalom and the longer fitness oriented stuff in enduro. You can't not train to be competitive these days. So even from when I started racing enduro, even you started racing enduro, you had some people that were fit, you had some people that had great bike handling skill. No one really had both. Now everyone seems to have a pretty good mix of both.
Yep.
The skilled guys have fitness, the fitness guys have skills. You can't just show up anymore to a race. The sport's grown so much in the last 5 years that I could rely on some athletic ability and downhill experience to do well. Now I got to spend a great deal of time on the trainer and still take some chances to do well. But that's awesome. It's again another step in the evolution of racing bikes for me. It was never about fitness, and it's slowly become more and more about fitness.
You're right. Like our race next weekend, we'll be on the bike 6.5, 7 hours on Sunday. Like that's a big day. Probably 7,000 feet of climbing in one day. Like it's going to be a monster. And you're right. You can't just show up and do that.
No.
Right. Like even though the races aren't timed on the way up, you still have, only the downhill stages are timed, you still have to have, your thoughts and be your wherewithal to make it down.
For sure.
And you can't do that when your heart rate's at its max.
No. Or you're cramping.
Right? There's so many things that training.
Yeah, it teaches you more about nutrition. And a lot of other things that, again, you don't necessarily get on the downhill side of things. Those guys have started to train quite a bit more in the last 10 years. We'll call it the G. Atherton, Aaron Gwynn effect.
That's so true.
You've got to put in more time for sure. And I think living locally, it's more conducive. Adam Robbins is a testament to that, and that we live in a better area. I tried to persuade him while he was a junior ex-downhiller to think more along the lines of enduro, just from a sponsorship standpoint. Too. So there's lots of different benefits there.
So how many times a week are you getting on the trainer now? We're end of February. How often are you getting on the trainer?
So being busy, the most that I can really kind of fit in without sacrificing more sleep is 3 hours a week. So I either do 45 minutes to an hour and a half 3 times a week.
Yep.
And this winter I've been focusing on climbing.
Yeah. Which makes sense, right? Because you have to get to the top, and that's
where my last couple winters have been interval based, and not so much climbing. And I've kind of paid the price at some of the bigger venues with the bigger days on the bike, where I've got great short power, but I don't have the best base fitness. Because as we get busier here in the shop, I have a harder and harder time fitting in rides. Might be lucky to ride 2 hours a week. that does not get you ready for a big race. So I've had to come to terms with possibly riding the trainer during the summer in the morning to get ready for a big race, because we don't have the vertical and I don't have the time. You know, I can spend the same amount of time on the trainer as I do maybe driving to the trails locally. So so 3.5 hours a week on average is how much time I'm spending on the trainer right now.
How you feeling? Like going, like, you know, so we got a race next weekend.
Obviously my upper body's suffering a little bit because I can't do anything, and it's it's tough for me to get to a gym and spend time on the trainer. So obviously it's easier to spend time on the trainer. But from a fitness standpoint, I don't feel like I've ever climbed more than I have in the last couple of months. So optimistic for next weekend.
Well, you're not in my category anymore, so that's good. So that kind of, as we were going through there, that is a ton of information. Like this is 55 minutes now, so we could probably talk another hour or two, just bouncing back and forth about different things. But I took some questions that I put through the Instagram post up there yesterday and said, hey, we're sitting down and talking. A lot of people don't have as convenient access to Brandon as I do, so I threw it out there. I'm like, you got questions? Throw them at me and I'll ask them for you. So we'll get into some of that now. I'm just going to hit reset on the camera and we'll get into a fresh little clip here. All right, so we'll get into the audience questions, I'm going to call them, from Instagram. I had a couple people actually just shoot me texts, be like, hey, ask him this. I want to know.
I'm stoked on the response from you.
So we had, like, I don't know, 10 different people send in questions, and a lot of them, Dave Cook, I love you. I can't ask 15 questions, okay? We'd be here all night on top of what we already had. But I will start with the question from Dave Cook, aka CKY78 on Instagram. Hit him up, follow him. Actually, follow all these guys. I'm gonna throw their Instagram handles out there. But Dave's first question was, are you aware that your passion for riding bikes has quite literally built, maintains, and continues to grow a community of like-minded individuals in and around our region? I'm gonna expand on that and say, are you aware of how much work you do, one, and how much you do for other people?
Yes and no, I'm sure, right? I'm definitely proud that I know I've had an impact on the community.
Sure.
Like I said before, I love seeing people that I've helped do well. They're almost like children, in a way.
Some of them act like children?
Yes, young or old. Young or old. But yeah, no, I'm definitely very proud of the impact I've had on the cycling community. I'm always pumped when somebody comes even into the shop and they're like, wow, you have the most amazing selection of mountain bikes. Because they're like, we're in London, right? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, where do people ride these? And we talk about a lot of these places we go and where people are riding their bikes. So I'm definitely pumped when people are generally excited about the inventory that we carry, or hearing about the trips that we go on, or the events that we're putting on. It definitely fuels my fire and my passion. So. And
then Dave's next question, so what sparked the passion? Kind of touched on that a little bit earlier. And what keeps it going? Like, what keeps that passion burning for you? Like, you've been in it for 20 years, race ridden, seen a lot. Like, why do you keep going?
I'm just as addicted to this sport as anybody. Like, I may be the worst. The first thing I do every morning is I get on my phone and I go to Pink Bike. We kind of have this thing amongst our group of friends to be like, who's the first person gonna be to see this? Dave Cook, unfortunately, is starting to take some thunder away from me here, but it is. I'm just addicted to the sport. It's evolving and growing at a constant rate, and it's almost exciting to try and keep up with, how it's evolving. But yeah, I really enjoy giving back. Like I say, it's I kind of struggled as an athlete as a kid because we didn't have the most money. I didn't have the best equipment, hockey, and the best bikes, and worked my ass off to get to where I am today, to be able to buy nice stuff and to be able to pay that forward to some other people. Like, I love when a young rider comes in the store and I can help him save money on a bike to get him to a race, so he has these experiences he can speak of for a lifetime.
Yeah. No, it's crazy. So Dave's next question, what is your favorite discipline to race now, and what was it 10 years ago? I know we kind of touched on how that's evolved, but what's your favorite?
in all honesty, that's probably never changed, because
I know what
the greatest event to me when I was racing pro was Crankworx dual slalom.
Yep.
The amount of work that those guys put into a dual slalom course, and the way that it feels when you nail everything perfectly, you're running back up to the top to get in another practice lap. And the crowds that you would get there at that event, like even racing as an amateur, because I was never gonna make the top 32 against Lopes and Graves, and, like even just a Whistler local, right? Like one of the times I got knocked out by Curtis Robinson of the Coastal Crew, an amateur. Like, like it's stacked out there, but the vibe of hanging out with those guys and them all seeing you as an equal and everyone's having fun, hence why I kind of brought it into our community, because it's a low consequence, super fun, skill building discipline. Don't get me wrong, I love downhill, but probably dual slalom to me is like the best event. We did the single slalom back at the US Open in the day.
Yeah.
We just recently discovered this Mid-Atlantic Championships down in Maryland with an amazing facility, which we took some of the crew from our slalom down to. I'm hoping to be in good enough shape to go back for that race this year, because there was over 200 people at that dual slalom race down in the States, and it was really cool. Guys were racing everything from full suspension bikes to BMX on the track. So I think slalom's my favorite.
Cool. We kind of touched on like results and failures for racing. Dave wants to know, what's your favorite racing memory?
Ooh.
You've done a lot of cool races, been in presence of a lot of amazing races, even when like World Cup stuff you're not even racing. Like what's that one thing you're like, that mental picture always puts a smile on your face?
I think it's probably that result with the U.S. Open for me. Like celebrating getting in, kind of having a bit of a party that night, maybe drinking too much Jägermeister, and then getting up the next day and backing that result up. I mean, like Sam Hill's in the field there, Steve Smith's in the field there. Like,
it's crazy,
like being considered a bit of an equal in the eyes of a lot of amateurs to those guys, being in that class and getting a top 40 is probably my most, cherished memory.
That's cool. Dave's last question. You got a lot of stoke. Is there a YouTube channel in your future?
Probably not, because it's very time consuming. I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube, which I'm now learning that I'm off here. Apparently lots of people spend copious amounts of time on YouTube, especially actually the demographic that shops here in the store. But no, I might help a little bit with some YouTube stuff along the way, but I don't have that kind of time. I'd rather spend time riding my bike. Yeah,
that makes sense. So question from Jeremy Leenders, aka at PDLMNKY_83. Where did you get that Instagram handle? How do you make the time between family and work to give back so much to those you have inspired to ride and to continue to be a huge advocate in the cycling community and industry?
So, I mean, we touched a little bit on this for sure, but I think, I take a small portion of the time that I would be riding my bike to build a start gate for dual slalom, or maybe go out and coach somebody. And I think, I don't spend a lot of time doing that, but I know it has a significant impact on the people that I do spend the time with, or that we do get out to an event, or the demo days that we do. And I feel that if everybody just did a little bit of that, we could definitely have a stronger community. A lot of people are very self-centered when it comes to riding. Don't get me wrong, I just want to ride my bike all the time too. But you've got to set aside some of that time to help foster the sport along. And I want to give back to the sport that's given to me so much. All of my best friends that I have from the last 20 years come from the cycling community, mainly the mountain bike community. I want to give back to what it's given to me. I've got friends all over the world from this sport. So I want to share in that experience.
Cool. This one comes from Colin Thompson, aka Mantis, at MANGTIS, which, I mean, Brandon gave him that nickname.
Might have been Adam. I don't know who came up with Mantis, but
it's hilarious. Colin, tell everyone why you have that nickname, and I would love to hear the story again. But Colin asks, how good is the racing on the East Coast compared to how it used to be? And how has it changed? The bikes, bikes, the venues, the disciplines. We kind of touched on like everything kind of morphing and evolving as a whole, and touched on Ontario and how that's changed, but like up and down the East Coast, like you've seen that evolve substantially on the race scene.
Yeah, so I mean, this past decade versus the decade before, the scene was stronger north of the border than south of the border. I mean, there were some big Norba races, but that kind of fizzled out, and their governing body hasn't had the strongest series south of the border. Thankfully, Eastern States Cup is, I think, 11 years old this year, so they've supported the last decade south of the border, but they often came up to Tremblant or Bromont or St. Anne back in the day because the scene was so strong up here. I mean, my first Canada Cup at Bromont, there was over 500 people at that race. We barely have a race in Quebec now, so I mean, it's gone from huge to almost non-existent.
I mean, we had like Ontario Cups, like at Kelso.
Yeah, 280, 300 people to a race.
Right?
So,
it's crazy.
So I mean, it's crazy. We've literally gone from a super strong series in the East to non-existent.
Up here in Canada.
And then obviously we've gone from big bike oriented now to trail bike oriented. So we're getting twice as many people to an enduro race in the Eastern States Cup Series than we are at a downhill race. I mean, we all know that's accessibility. A lot more people have trail bikes. The consequences tend to be a little bit lower. It's a little more beginner friendly than a downhill race, and doesn't cost as much still. A entry-level downhill bike is still a little bit more than the cost of a trail bike. So the big shift is north and south, and obviously downhill bike to trail bike. So.
I'd say like the downhill bike and trail bike, you can use your trail bike way more often than you can a downhill bike.
For sure, and a good chunk of people racing a downhill might be racing on the trail bike.
Yeah,
where that never used to happen before. So that's definitely the big shift.
Next one comes in from Dan Bruxer, aka at D_Bruxer, BRUXER. This is a great question, one I didn't think of, but it's a very good one. Like, what do you think you would be doing now if you hadn't discovered the best sport in the world, also known as mountain biking?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'd definitely be involved in a sport at a fairly high level. I think sport has been the most constant, biggest part of my life, starting with traditional sports, then learning about individualized sports more or less around the X Games when the X Games launched. There was a lot of cool aspects of that I liked, from the freestyle moto to the BMX. So I would be involved in some other sport. It would be hard to say exactly what that is because mountain biking kind of fell in my lap, and look where we are now, right? I'd probably take a bit of a page out of D. Brux's book here and be spending some time exploring the globe a little bit.
He is traveling a lot. I don't know where he is anymore.
I got, we were well traveled in North America with the racing that we did, but there are so many places that I would love to check out in the world, and obviously the mountain biking budget takes away from a lot of that stuff. So I'd probably be hitting up a lot of these places that the young guys that used to race for us are checking out for sure.
Cool. So now moving on, we'll go to Jack Bowes. So Jack is a good friend of ours, and we travel a lot together, and he just fired me a couple of quick text messages. So I'm going to keep these ones pretty point form because we could be here for a while. So first question, name off the top of your head in less than 30 seconds the top 5 places in North America you've ridden so far.
Top 5. So I mean, obviously everyone's going to say Whistler. Plattekill.
Yeah.
Bromont, Windrock.
Okay.
I mean, super heavy East Coast here, obviously.
One more.
Where else? I'm going to say Thunder these days, man. Yeah, I'm really excited to go back to Thunder with the changes. I mean, riding that Fort Hill Trail this September got me fired up. Like, that is, I feel like at almost turning 40, that's almost above my pay grade. But it's so appealing to have something bigger than Dirt Merchant open to the public on the East Coast. So thankfully for most of it, I got young Adam Robbins to tow me in for, making things a little easier. And then he made me
it's because you still guinea
pigged in the biggest gap for him. So yeah, Thunder would be my last one for sure.
Cool. And I mean, like, we could probably debate that, those top 5.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of close ones in there for sure.
With mountain biking growing so quickly, where do you see going the next 5 years? And we kind of touched on that, but maybe just circle back around.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we're just going to continue to see a ton of growth. Like I say, especially on the women's market, the kids, like, you know, like the second generation or third generation of mountain bikers, where they're growing up with amazing quality products at a young age. You know, like I think about the bike my son started out on at 6, and being able to go race some BMX and go ride some trail and then go to joyride, and I'm like, I mean, you see it with the kids in Whistler, like they're 8, 10, 12 years old and they're riding like professional athletes because they've grown up in that environment. So I think the sport's just going to continue to grow.
I think, you know, like with the kids and evolving, I mean, I think everyone who's not familiar with it, Google Jackson Goldstone, right? And Jackson Goes to School. Like, just Google those 2 things and watch some of those videos.
Yeah, I mean, he's on a plane to New Zealand right now for Crankworks, right? I mean, it's pretty amazing watching the progression.
It's cool. I remember like the Jackson Goes to School video on him on his run bike from years ago now.
For sure. Well, I mean, even what Emily Batty's doing with the Durham Shredders in you know, her hometown, like they just built a facility for these kids to train in. Like it is amazing. Like those resources were not there 10 or 15 years ago.
So 5 years ago.
No, for sure. So it's amazing to see.
So Jack's last question. I find it quite interesting, the eclectic mix of friends. That's a good word, eclectic. Eclectic mix of friends that you seem to have amassed through riding. Do you feel that mountain biking transcends all walks of life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I am super excited. I mean, I'm of a bit of a growth mindset, and I love learning from other people, especially people that I trust in and confide in, and the different mix of people that are in my truck from one weekend to the next can be super different. But like, you know, on the last trip, I learned a whole bunch about archaeology. Right, and then trip before that was a whole bunch about greenhouses, and like it's the conversation's always great because there's so many cool things to learn about and what's going on in everyone's day-to-day life, let alone the bike chat about Bruni and Mount St. Anne or whatever. So it's you're right, it is a really interesting mix of people, and it you know, we've got people that just learned to downhill in their 40s or their 50s, and then the young kids that are still in high school. So and the youth have always said it's cool to spend the time with the older guys riding because you do learn so much about life in general. So
yeah,
it is amazing.
Yeah, it does. I mean, in my opinion, it does transcend all walks of life. I know, you know, with Jack in particular, like we were in a trip with Adam. Like Adam was 21. I'm 32, and Jack's I think 51 or 52. Yeah. We were literally all 3 hanging on the truck together for 8 hours, talking, chatting like it was normal. Then when you like take a second to think about that, where else did that really happen?
And I mean that goes back to starting the team in a way, right? We used to call it 4 generations of speed. It was like the teens, the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s, and it was like, you know, the juniors, me, Derek, and Greg, and it's like we still sort of have that spread now. I mean, there's less people on the team, but it is pretty amazing.
Super cool. So we'll end up with a couple really lighthearted questions that we have to ask. So Jared Dick, aka at JAREDDYCK _ on Instagram, asked 2 questions. What's the one thing I can do to instantly be better at slalom? And more importantly, what's one way I could cheat to beat you and Vic at slalom?
I don't know about cheating, but I can tell you that I spent a great deal of time last winter doing 30-second intervals on the trainer, and the amount of difference in watts over 30 seconds from the start of the winter to the end of the winter. When I went and raced the dual slalom race in Massanutten in the spring, like no one was touching me at the slalom race because of the amount of time I had put in doing intervals, and I didn't really think about it till later in the year because you just kind of a bit of an oversight. But when you spend that much time preparing around, you know, something that specific for a sprint like a slalom, that snap out of the gate and that sprint at the end, like that's probably the best advice I could give is spend a little bit of time on the trainer or out on your bike doing some sprints on the street.
It is crazy. So, and Jared, I know like my suggestion, I mean, I'm just gonna throw this out there.
Or Stumpy Gate.
Stumpy Gate, like we built.
Yeah, for sure.
That helps, but yeah, like if you're cruising along on the road, like sprint 15 seconds and then coast for 30. Sprint 15, do 30. Do that for 10 minutes. You're gonna be sore. Your legs gonna be pumped up. You start doing that leading up to races. It's a great way to kind of build up. And then I think I can sort of put this out there too. Go out, spend $10 on cheap plastic
yeah, dollar store cones. Right? I know. Lots of people bought dollar store cones over the years.
And you just go put them out on a grass hill. You set them up as close to kind of as what you feel is proper, and just corner. I know, like we did that for
find the edge of the tire. I find so many people are like, I found the edge of the tire, and I'm like, there's still more there. Like, you know, like go to the point where you're going to slide out. You know,
and don't be afraid to slide out.
Absolutely,
like it's just grass. Like
if you're afraid to go down, you're never going to get to where you need in that corner for sure. So
perfect. And then the last question, my favorite, I think, because I know you pretty well. It comes from Adam Robbins. So at Adam Robbins 98. What type of rum makes you ride fastest? And so for those people that don't know, Brandon has I don't know, in the fiction, or he has a love of rum. So what type makes you go the fastest?
So the go-to these days for race fuel is Captain Morgan Black, which we originally came across at the Wyndham World Cup, which was pretty amazing timing, I must say. But yeah, thanks to Greg Carcass, I have switched over from whiskey over the years to dark rum. Yeah, Mama Zadrillik used to bring me the Crown Royal to the races. Love you, Mama Zadrillik, for that. But yeah, the go-to these days is Captain Black.
Crazy. Who would have thought? One of the fastest guys on the East Coast for 20 years drinks rum religiously, I would say. So that's it, guys. That is an hour and 20 minutes. So I knew this was going to be long, and I could probably keep going for a while. But thanks for tuning in. We're probably going to have to do, you know, this again at some point, maybe mid-season, and see how things are tracking along, see how his shoulder is.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and we'll talk to you later. Sick.